Hi, everybody. Today we're talking with Christina Hamlin, who has been doing design, who's been a design executive and design leader for a long fucking time. And Christina wrote an awesome article that we're going to be discussing today, which has to do with design tests, right? Whiteboard tests, design practices, stuff that happens for a lot of designers and UX practitioners in the interviews. Christina, do you want to maybe kick us off and like talk to us about that article and talk to people about why they should go read that article?
Sure. Well, thanks, Brian. And thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. But I wrote the article for two main reasons. Well, I guess maybe three. One is just the frustration that we all experience when we go through these, performative exercises that just seem like, why are we doing this, right? And also to like let people know that this is a thing that we're all experiencing. We're not alone in this, right? And so the reasons behind why we do it, right? Like why we do participate in these things. And then the other piece of it for me is when I was talking to other executives, not just in design, in other networking groups that I'm in, I've always kind of thought this was a design thing, right? This is the thing that we're always asked to do. But it turns out that's not freaking true. Almost everybody is asked to do these kinds of things. And I think when you get caught in your own little bubble, sometimes you seem to forget that, right? Because a lot of design leaders I talk to are kind of like, oh, we shouldn't be doing these things. I can't believe they're asking us to do it. And I'm like, no, it's not just us, it's everybody. So it just takes.
Before you keep going, tell us what the title is of your article.
Oh, shoot. The free work trap is what it was, right? And it was, like I was saying earlier, not just about why we do it, but to when it crosses the line, when it goes from like being, understanding your value and what you bring to the table or actually doing free work, because there is a difference.
So getting on that topic, what's the difference or what's the line for people that were watching this and are like thinking about maybe they're going through their own practices or they're evaluating it? What is the line between the evaluation aspect of it versus the extraction aspect of it? And like, what are the red flags that you've spotted?
Sure. And sometimes it's hard to tell, right? But for me, it's when one of the examples I gave in the article, like, when I was at the end of the work that they asked me to do, they were like, oh, let's turn this into tickets right now. And we can just start doing this work. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Because that to me is when it becomes exploitive, right? Where it's like, oh, we're just going to ask you to do these things. We're going to ask you to jump through these hoops, but then we're just going to use the work. And we may or may not hire you. And so for me, that's when it crosses the line, right? When they're asking you to do something like, what would you do to solve this problem is different than solve this problem for us and tell us exactly how to do it, right? Because for me, when I'm trying to do the former, I'll spin it into the experience I've had, right? Where I'm like, well, I've done something like this before, and this is how I did it, and this was the outcome of it, as opposed to, let me come in and solve all your problems. Because you can't either, right? You can't possibly know what it's like inside that company, no matter if you know people or how many conversations you have. Until you're inside, you can't know. Right?
Christina, I want to also chime in here from like a high level, even though maybe people listening right now haven't read the article. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a brief overview of what the article's about and a little bit more about, just the details of how you would kind of change the interview process? So maybe high level first, and then kind of get into a little bit of that nitty gritty.
Sure. So the high level is really about, from the design perspective, because that's where I live, when we're asked to do these things, right? When we're asked to do a portfolio review, when we're asked to do a whiteboard exercise, when we're asked to do free work, right? What does that mean? How did that make you feel? When to know, again, why you're making the choice to do that. And then when it does cross the line, like we've talked about before. And so in the article, I just give my perspective on it. And I give two examples of things that I've gone through in the last 6 months and the outcomes of them. And just kind of reflecting back on it and to think about, again, why. Because the two examples I gave, I did them for very different reasons. One was because I was in a really bad position at the company I was in, and I was feeling kind of burnt out, right? And I was feeling like, can I even do this anymore? Should I do this anymore? So part of it was to prove it to me, right? And that was the one where they were like, oh, we're going to turn it into tickets. And I'm like, And I chose not to take that job when they did offer it to me. I mean, part of it was that for that reason, right? Because I'm like, if that's what it's like in the interview process, what's it going to be like to work there?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second example that I gave was a job that I was really excited about. And I really wanted it. And, through the whole process, they're like, we're not going to make you jump through hoops. We just want to have conversations and really think about your thought process, right? So I was really excited. And at the end, there were 2 of us. And they're like, now we're going to make you jump through hoops. And I'm like, okay, sure. Because after you invest all of that time, you're like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then I didn't win that one. And that hurt, But that made me really want to get that out there to be like, we're not alone. Because again, why are we doing it? Are you doing it to prove it to yourself? Are you doing it because you really want that job? Are you doing it because if I won't do it, somebody else will? And it's a pretty saturated market right now, So just trying to get that clarity for yourself of why you do it.
Christina, you talked about the saturated market. Can you tell us what you've been facing recently? There's been a spark. We definitely have hit a nerve with some of our podcast episodes talking about layoffs. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean when you said that.
So layoffs, real thing, right? That's been happening for the last year or so. AI is also a real thing because there are a lot of companies, especially for designers, that think, oh, AI can do your job for you. And of course, that's not true. We still need the experts there to learn how to use the tools. And that's a whole other conversation that we can get into. But there are a lot of design leaders out of work right now. And that's because, I think of it kind of like a pendulum, right? The market always goes like everyone was investing in it. Maybe we invested too much. So now we're going to over rotate the other way. And maybe it's going to come back. It will come back. But how long is it going to take? I don't know. But in the groups that I'm in, again, with design executives, I think I was at a party this past weekend and there were maybe 20 of us there. And I think only 2 people had roles right now.
Right.
And that's wild, right? Like that's crazy. And because the market is so small for us, everybody's going for the same roles, right? But the cool part about it is that we were all super supportive of each other. We're like, hey, did you go for that one? Yeah, it didn't work for me, but it might work for you. Hey, did you go? And so we were all kind of supporting each other, which felt nice.
I thought it was really interesting. Just a moment ago, you mentioned that within the other design leaders kind of complaining about having to go through design challenges, but you mentioned that executives, all other executive levels, also go through design challenges. I'd be curious to know from you or from what you've understood, what's similar and what's different. And the other question after that is like, are these evaluations effective?
Right. That's a really great question. So as far as the other kinds of challenges, it might be if you're a CMO, like write a 30, 60, 90 plan, right? What are the marketing things you would do? For PMs, or engineering, it's like solve this problem for us. So it's very similar. It's just depending on what the vertical is, right? So for us, you might be whiteboarding something. For somebody else, you might be just talking through the challenges. But whether or not they're successful, I feel like it really depends on what the conversation is. And really, again, if they're trying to just get free work out of you or not, right? If you feel like you can really talk about your thought process and how you've solved challenges like this and really kind of banter back and forth and be like, well, what about this? What about this? And kind of act like you do work there, but you're solving the problem together, right? When I think back to a place that I worked, 3 or 4 places ago, I had to do a whiteboard challenge. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I kept asking questions, right? And be like, well, what is this parameter? Or asking, for fitting into it. And they'd all sit there and look at me and be like, I don't know. What do you think? I'm like, what is this a collaboration? Or is this just, you really just want me to tap dance up here? And especially when, again, you don't know what's going on inside. So for me, I think it can be effective if it feels like you're actually having a conversation, right? And there is a back and forth and you're having a thought partner in that, right? I mean, I do it myself on my, I've hired hundreds of people and I have done these types of things myself.
Sure.
The way I think about it is I'm like, I do something silly. I do a whiteboard challenge that has nothing to do with anything in the company at all, because I really do just want to see how they break down a problem and how they think, truly. But I got to tell you, the more times I've gone through it, I've rethought it. And I'm like, I don't know if it is effective. And I don't know what I'm going to keep doing when I am in my next role and I have to hire people again, right? I mean, we have to show our work, we have to show portfolio, and I want to see how people think about it. But that's a whole nother, piece of this where I'm sure you both have done this too, where like you're like, okay, this is my case study and I'm going to tailor it to exactly what I think they want. But you're not even really telling the story of the work that you did anymore, because you're molding it into what you think they want to hear, and it gets really glossy and you don't talk about all the messy stuff. And I'd rather we did. I'd rather we talk about that messy stuff, because that's reality.
I agree. And I have noticed, so I've gone through some whiteboarding challenges myself where I have failed recently. Them. And the two big things that I've noticed is I got advice to go look on YouTube. Even though I've worked for 20 years as a designer, I got advice to go look on YouTube to see how other people are doing design challenges,
Really?
to conform to the way in which other people have been doing the tap dance, which seems like not a good evaluation strategy and seems like a problem. If we all start to hire designers and we all start to evaluate them and all of their thinking is following the same YouTube instructor's format, then they're actually not thinking.
Right. And they're not you, right? They're hiring what they think you are. And then when you get in the role and you start being authentic and you start being who you are, assuming that you feel comfortable enough to do that, right? Which is the hope. Then they're like, well, wait a second, that's not what I saw before, right? Or you start using frameworks you haven't used before and they don't feel right, right? And so to me, Brian, that feels exploitive, right?
Yeah.
Like, is that that's how you felt when you started looking at these, right? Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
Right?
no, yeah. I didn't, and I will say for me, I don't know if you two have had this experience as well, but I also sometimes would then question, oh, the person who was evaluating me was like much younger than me, and like I literally like opened up my Cintiq and opened up FigJam and started drawing through FigJam, and they're like, I've never seen this type of thing before, and I was like, this is a whiteboard challenge. So anyhow, I would be curious if you two have had. I open this up because I'm curious to know if you both have had also that type of same experience where it's someone who's out of a boot camp, who's been promoted up quickly, who like you're now interviewing with.
I haven't had to do those kinds of challenges yet with somebody younger than me, but have I interviewed with people that are much younger than me? Sure have. And that's not inherently a problem necessarily, but I'm always of the mindset of like, hire someone that's better than you, hire someone that has more experience, because you're going to make me look better, right? But I feel like not everyone feels that way, and I think the reason I haven't gone forward in those is because they're like, oh, I don't know, I think she might want my job, or she knows things I don't know. I'm gonna go where I am more comfortable with somebody that I can feel like I know more than. So it could be. I haven't had the pleasure yet, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I in my experience, I haven't necessarily been interviewed by somebody younger. Usually the recruiters are, and they're also a little bit more unfamiliar with our work. And so I try not to get too garbly, when you start talking in too many acronyms and being kind of annoying in that way. So I try to reel that back. But the whiteboard challenge I've done, but usually what I have done is I think like you, Christina, like just doing something playful where it's like, let's pretend we're gonna create an app to, I don't know, adopt a dog or something, right? And so it's more not about the business itself, but it's more about the thinking. And I think that's where you were getting at, Christina, right? Is like more of that, where they're playful examples, but they're still kind of in real life, where it's maybe a mobile or web version of a application or an internal app, and you're kind of giving examples that have nothing to do with the business itself. How would you give us some recommendations on, if people are watching and they are in the position, maybe it's something new, obviously with all these layoffs, people are being promoted like Brian says, and so maybe they just need ideas from someone seasoned. What should somebody do in the interview process?
Yes, I think a lot of it is not to, I hate those, tell me about a time where, but it's really where you can talk more about experience that you have, right? I've worked with Jacob Warwick, which is who I wrote the article with. So shout out to Jacob, he's amazing. But what he always tries to switch it around to is like, why am I here? Like, why are you talking to me? Right. Which when he first said that to me, I'm like, what? I would never say that to a recruiter. What are you talking about? Right. But they're like, I think I'm here because I've shown how I can do vision work for a company, how I can have impact for a company. Is that why you're talking to me? So it frames it again in the problems you've solved before,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting. And I know it depends on the level too, right? Like it's easy for me to say, as someone who's worked at like the VP and above level, where it's, when someone will come to you and say, I want you to do this free work for me, to be like, what are we trying to solve here?
Right.
What are we trying to do? Can we get to the problem of that, right? I could, tap dance for you, but I think it would be better if we talk through some real challenges together. That's easier than somebody who is, an IC who's, just like, hey, I just want to do this job. You do have to feel like you have to go through those hoops, right? But my advice really, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is to be authentic and to be you. And I know that that's scary, but if you have a good hiring manager, they're going to want that. They're going to see that and they're going to be like, man, this person's awesome. I want them on my team, right? They know how to think. And from a hiring manager perspective, I think, you and I have already hit on this, Eve, but have it grounded in something like it's an app, sure, but it's on something really silly, because then it does get to that thinking. I've done parking for cities. I've done borrowing animals before, kind of like, Airbnb for pets. I've done like door locks, to be like, hey, we have this door lock and we don't have an interface for it. How would you design it? And then you start going down those avenues of like, oh, what if the power goes out? What do we do then? Or,
Yes.
things like that. And you try to, and in all of those examples, when you see them enough, you're like, okay, let's get through the surface stuff and let's start going deeper. And whenever someone hits on something that no one's talked about before, I'm like, tell me more about that. Let's talk about that. And that's when you get it, you get excited about it. And you're like, I really do want to understand how you think, because that's what we are, right? We're problem solvers. So let's get to that. That's way more exciting.
I did the parking for the city one when
Yeah.
I interviewed with Christina years
Nice.
ago.
Okay.
How did you think about it? Yeah.
Well, you did one thing that you did really well was first off, you caveated it with being like, I know I hate design challenges. Design challenges suck. This is
That's
like
good.
Christina said this. Christina's like, I know design challenges are not great. This is just, so you caveated it really well with like, this is going to be a playful activity. And that was good for me, because I think that for a lot of designers and UX professionals, we need to be able to like loosen up to do our best work. And so like you set that tone. One of my Pradeep Nair, who worked at Allstate, he had also done the same. He used to use a goldfish. He'd be like, his cousin has a pet store and they're trying to sell goldfish, and he would do this kind of goldfish exercise, and it was the same type of thing where it was like kept lightweight. And then you also did the same thing that Pradeep did, which was like you walk through, oh, okay, here's how we could go about this. And then you kind of like throw a little bit of a curveball to see like how do you deal with like some pressure or some like kind of like, and that I think is also really helpful. But like keeping it kind of lightweight and just being like almost more of a we're going to interact, but we're going to like chat through it, and we're going to talk through it, and so it becomes truly about thinking versus no, I expect by the end of this thing to have fully designed Figma screens, which is insane, or a full prototype, which is like makes no sense. So yeah.
Sense. I think you going back to that one, Brian, I remember the funniest story for me of doing that parking app. It was when we first were started doing them virtually, right? So this was,
Oh
back
yeah.
do them in person. And we always had somebody playing the role, playing the PM, playing the design buddy. And then in the parking one, we would have the mayor of the city you'd have to do a presentation to them at the end. And I always had somebody else play that role. It used to be me and whatever, but for this the one time it was like on the fly, somebody couldn't make it. And we were doing it virtually. We were like, oh my God. And I had to do both roles. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And so we did the thing, and then you kind of go off camera for a minute and let them do their bit, get it all together before they do the presentation. And I looked down on our dining room table, and it was just past Halloween, and my husband and I had gone as Bob Ross, and Bob Ross was painting. And I saw the Bob Ross wig sitting there, and I'm like, am I going to do it? Yeah, I'm going to do it. So I put on the wig and turned it back on. And I was like, I'm the mayor and I'm here for this. And the candidate just started it was trying so hard not to crack up. But then they're like, oh, hello, Mr. Mayor. And I'm like, oh. And I ended up hiring her. I thought she was fantastic in the way that she dealt with that. But then it became a thing. So I'd always dress up at the mayor, and I'd always be a different mayor every time. But that's the thing, man. I'm just trying to make people comfortable so they can be authentic, right? Yeah. That's who I want to hire. So, and I did hire Brian too, by the way, just for anybody who's watching.
For the record.
For the record.
Yes.
One thing that I was curious about, that speaking of roles and playing different roles, I thought of the fact that when there's you as a head of UX or a senior director of UX or a VP, right, and the leader role, and then evaluating down the UX practitioners, designers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But then I'm curious to know from you, Christina, like the visibility of upwards, because even I have both had the experiences too of like going into roles of like where we might be the founding designer or like the first, and then you have these people that are product officers or are new CEOs or new VC people who have no idea, no UX experience, no education in design, and what their evaluation is or how that works, and or even in corporate America, how that has worked. I would love if you could talk to that.
Yes. So I haven't been a founding designer in a while. And I don't think they did. I don't remember. It was a while ago when that happened. But for when I'm interviewing for roles that I would want to take, those are the people that are generally evaluating me, right? I would work with my product partner, a CPO, a head of engineering, because oftentimes I'm interviewing to be the head of the department, right? So we might have other people on the panel that are other designers, and I would certainly freaking hope so, because you want to be able to talk to some of them. But it is the VP of product or it is the CPO that's talking to me. And I find that in both of those examples that in my article, that was true. And so I think that's part of it too, because they don't know from a design perspective what they're asking for. So I haven't had to do a whiteboard in a little while, right? Because they wouldn't even know what to do, right? But it then becomes more of a conversation. But where both of those fell down, and I hadn't really thought about it this way, actually, Brian, so thank you for saying it. But, when they've asked me to evaluate their product, the part that felt like exploitation to me was probably because they didn't know what else to do, right? They're like, well, I guess I'll have you give me your, your take on our product or our, what we have in the market right now, and what you would do is with AI for it or whatever. Because what else are they going to evaluate on? They won't know, what my design thinking tools are. They're not going to know. They might know how to run a team, but they don't know how to run a design team, right? So maybe that's why they do default to that. Maybe that's the next thing I'll write about. But like maybe they do go there because what else would they do? They don't know. They don't know what to do. And so in their mind, that's what design leaders do, right? They just make it look pretty. Ooh, don't get me started on that. But maybe that's why they default to those kinds of challenges at that level. It's an interesting take on it, but it makes sense, right? Because what else can they ask for?
What else can they ask for? And they're I mean, you and I both also experienced people who worked above you and I who would brag about very tangential experiences in design. So, and like as their sole touch points. And like, so, I mean, I guess part of it is I guess this is part of our challenge as a community, is like starting to think of like, how do we educate those folks, and how do we start to get them like, I guess, like maybe part of what we could think about is what conversations would we have with those folks about how to evaluate design leaders and
Yes.
UX leaders?
I think that's it. And when I think about that role that I was talking about in the article, the one that I really wanted, that I was really excited. The reason I thought about it, because I've always called my team product experience, which, Brian, instead of saying design, for a multitude of reasons, right? But the first one is to get it away from the making it look pretty, right? Because we're much more than the pixels. And because my team is usually more than designers, right? It's research, it's content, it's operations, and that's not super inclusive, right? To be like, oh, we're part of the design team. But it's also to get people to think about the experience, right? That's what I care about. Do I care how it looks? Yes, of course I do. But I care about how it functions more than anything. And so the role I was excited about, they actually called it an product experience role. And I was like, what? And I get so many people reach out to me on LinkedIn thinking that I'm a product person. And I'm like, well, no, but kind of, but no, but so it is confusing. I get it. But why I got excited about it is they were thinking about the role that way. They were like, hey, we're going to have some product people roll up to you, right? Because we want to change the experience of how things function. And normally, as we also know, design often rolls up to the product people. So they were turning it on their head. And that's why I got really excited about it. I'm like, oh my God, you're thinking about it the right way. You're thinking about it this way. And so one of the things I'm trying to do when I talk to people and have those initial conversations is to talk about it that way, to say, hey, this is about the experience. Have you thought about being a differentiator in your field, about thinking about it in an experiential way, not just in a pixels way? That's going to be a hard one to hammer down, but I think it's important because that is really how I feel about it.
Yeah, Christina, I wanted to maybe go back a little bit. You talked about being in a room with other design leaders, and there was about 2 of you that were currently working. And I want to connect that with a current, just something that I've seen currently. Brian, we haven't talked about this, but, Don Norman, he wrote the book, The Design of Everyday Things, and has currently been in India teaching user experience. And I was just this morning talking to a design leader about where kind of our future this kind of short-term future, what's happening within, let's say, the next 6 months, the next year, of these design leaders, right, that aren't necessarily working. Don Norman in India teaching, design thinking, user experience. As we know, a lot of tech roles have shifted overseas. And so with that, Do you have any kind of reaction or kind of, I guess my question would be, with what we're seeing here, homeland versus what's happening overseas, where do you have any idea of what is kind of what the pulse is like, what's happening, what's changing?
I feel like if we talk about, people working outside of the country or shifting to India, those kinds of things, honestly, that is not something I hear about a lot anymore. Not that it's not happening, but that isn't that. I feel like that was a concern of like 5 or 6 years ago, where people were really concerned about that. I have not heard that in my circles of design leaders as something that, people are really concerned about right now. Certainly it still happens. And I always try to think about having a full stack team out there. You can't just like, throw it over the fence and hope for the best, right?
Right.
You have to think about that. The thing that is really, of course, the biggest disruptor right now is just AI. Like that's what everybody's talking about. And it's interesting to me, and I'm curious what you two think about this, because certainly in design, our tools change all the time, right? Like maybe we're using Photoshop, we're using Sketch, now we're using Figma, it's always different. And we have to adapt to those things.
Yeah.
And to me, AI is just another tool. And when I think about, when I give talks about like, oh, how did you get to where you are in your career? As my kids say, I went to school in the 1900s. I'm like, thanks, guys, love you too. But it was a while ago, right? And I did more traditional design work. My degree is in graphic design because that's what it was. UX wasn't a thing then.
Yeah.
And the people I graduated with, that didn't stay relevant, that didn't keep on top of new tools. I mean, what's in print now? Nothing, right? A couple people are like, ad directors or, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, that's what we did back then if, once you graduated. But, I'm like, oh, I'm going to teach myself how to code. Oh, I'm going to start designing for mobile. Oh, I'm going to start doing these other things and staying on top of that trend. And I feel like that's where I got to where I am now. And so to me, that's what AI is too, right? And I know that isn't necessarily what you asked, Eve, but I don't feel that the fear of everything shipping off to India is a thing. I feel like that's happened, right? And everyone's kind of figured out how to work with it, and some companies do it and some don't. That's fine. And you just kind of figure out how to work with distributed teams, which is a fact of life for everybody right now, no matter where they are. But it's really just about staying adaptable, staying, on top of whatever the new thing is, whether it's a new design tool or it's something like AI. I feel like why it feels so different now is because it's just impacting us, it's impacting everybody. And so people are like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, we know how to do this. We've done this 1,000 times before. Listen to us. Let us lead the way with you, right? And so I feel like that's what's on people's minds. And in some of the design leader groups I'm in, not the one I mentioned earlier, but a different one, people are like, oh, AI, it's taking our jobs and we don't get to do all the things that we do. I'm like, guys, that attitude is going to get you out of work, right? You have to think about how to adapt it and how to make it work for you and not against you, just like anything else, right?
Perfect.
I have such mixed feelings about it all. I think, I think generative AI is worsening our experience online as a general, like it's polluting our information and our, like everything that we need. But the other thing that I worry about is I worry about the UX industry and the UX practitioners, leadership, the practice altogether is not ready for this moment. Like fundamentally, I thought about, even I have talked about several times about how like we're so good at building design systems, and yet we're so bad at building any type of consistency about roles or like what we should do or how or what UX is versus what product experience is versus what product design is versus what UI, what interaction designers are, like just like really being firm about those roles and not letting small agencies grab up and fuck up all of our roles when they decide that all those items are interchangeable, and also like staffing and recruiting agencies act as though all of those are interchangeable and not realizing that there's generalist versus specialist.
Yeah.
But like, I just feel like we need to clean our own house before
Mhm.
we're able to get to the point of.
For sure. And to that point, like if we can start to really getting crisp about that, AI is just another one of those things, right? AI isn't the catch-all. It isn't the come in and do everything. It's this is the place where to use it. This is the effective place to use it. Like when I think about, I used to love building wireframes in Acture. It would take weeks, to build these like, I love
Yeah.
that was like, oh, it was my jam, right? And I'll never do that again because why would you, right? So building the wireframes, sure, yeah. But I feel a lot better about having a 10-minute project that's a throwaway than a 2-week project that's a throwaway, right? So it's really thinking about what is AI good for and where isn't it? And the thing, coming back to talking about non-design leaders, where I'm like, look, AI is a tool, it doesn't have taste, right? It's just going to spit out what it sees other places, right? And it's so hard to build trust with your customers. It's so hard, right? But it's so easy to lose it. And
Yep.
the quickest way to do it is having unchecked AI, right? Because the first time it hallucinates at you, the first time it spits out something that looks like Apple when it doesn't look like the interface that you have, because that's what it's pulled from the web, you're done. You're done. When you bolt it on and it doesn't feel like part of your company, right? And it doesn't feel like it's adding value, you're done. And you've lost that customer and those next 10, 20, 100 customers, right? So you still need those experts in place. And I'm not just saying about in our field, the expert engineer, the expert PM, the expert everybody that can say, yeah, we can make it go faster and we can do some production work maybe, sure. But we have to learn new skills too about how to craft those prompts to make it make sense. And that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other industry that someone's going to start having now, is like teaching people how to write prompts effectively.
Right.
And then there's so many tools. There's so many different tools that we can use now. And the prompting is different in all of them, and I feel like we're at that point, like we were with when everyone was making really crappy apps because you could, right? And then the ones that were worth it stuck around, and all those little crappy app companies went out. And I feel like that's where we're at with AI right now. There's so many AI companies. Oh my God, so many AI companies, so many. And it's gonna start, whether the bubble burst or whatever acronym, whatever euphemism you want to use, but it's gonna start happening. And it's gonna be the ones that are using it the right way, that are building trust with their customers, that are extending their capabilities and not cutting people because of it, that are going to be around.
Have you both heard Nilash, who is he's a reporter for Decoder, has been asking about what he calls the DoorDash problem. The DoorDash problem is the notion that Claude or ChatGPT or any of these other AIs, what happens when you're just able to directly ask them to get you the sandwich, and have the sandwich get delivered to you, and how that starts to like cut out, like what happens to the app ecosystem then, and what happens then.
I haven't heard that yet, but yeah, that's a thing, right? I was at an AI conference, listening to people talk, and something that stuck with me, and I hate that I don't remember who said it, but you made me think of it, Brian, where they were talking about, the apps. So like, when everyone was making apps, great, when the iPhone came out, everyone started making apps, right? There are thousands of them, but it was like 8 years or 9 years before the ones that were worth anything, whether it was the DoorDashes or the Ubers and those kinds of things that are ubiquitous now, before those came out. So there was a lot of crap before those came out. I feel like, Amazon's tried drone delivery, right? How's that gone? Everyone was afraid that was going to happen a couple years ago, and that isn't everywhere yet, right? And so I feel like there's going to be a lot of, I'm never going to get my sandwich, right? When you think you're going to, and then what, right? So that little service is out, or you're going to stop asking AI to do that because it doesn't work. You don't trust it anymore, right? Then you're going to go back to DoorDash and be like, all right, I'm really hungry. Bring me my sandwich, right? So it's going to be the people, and I feel like it does come back to that trust, right? Like it's going to come back to the people that can deliver on the promises that they make to you. and where AI should be. Yeah, we could talk
Or-
about it all day.
Brian, I was thinking about the sandwich being stuck in the snow in Chicago and people going against it.
Yeah, I don't, Christina. I told Eve that people were posting on Reddit because we have the robots now coming through Chicago, and so one of them got stuck in the snow, and someone posted on Reddit like "die clanker die," like so like there's already the mini robot revolt that's beginning.
Well, it's the thing you see in the Bay mostly are the Waymos, right? So the robot Ubers, and I've ridden in one exactly one time, and it was with a former coworker of ours, Brian, and I was like, okay, and it's kind of interesting at first because you're sitting in the back and you're talking, and you kind of forget there's nobody driving the car, and you're like, okay, it's kind of weird, but well, like here we are. But to kind of play on that, what you were saying, Brian, like we stopped at a light and we were just talking, not paying attention. And I noticed the car in front of us that's at the light. The driver got out and started walking towards us. And I'm like, what's going on? Well, apparently, I don't know if he was an ex-cab driver, an Uber driver, or whoever, really did not like Waymos. And he started wailing on our car.
Oh my goodness.
On it. You can't really see who's in the back because it's, so I don't think he could see us, but we're both like, what happened? What happens now?
Whoa.
And then the light turned green, he got in his car and he drove away. And I will say their customer service was amazing because they immediately called us in the car and was like, what's going on? And we're like, this guy's wailing on the car. We don't know why. Like, I don't know what's happening. But that's what I've seen a lot. People in San Francisco will post like people just like trying to set them on fire or trying to knock them over because they're just like, we don't want the robo cars here, but they're everywhere. Like there's no getting away from it now. It's wild. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Yeah,
I've
seen the Waymos are in Nashville as well, so we're seeing them all over.
I'm just glad it didn't turn into like Ed 209 and start like firing at that guy.
Yeah, yes. But I was like, okay, but they have so many cameras on them, like they could see what was going on. They're like, we have this information. We're like, okay.
Wow.
But then you see like one didn't stop at a school bus when it had its stop sign out and it just drove past because I'm like,
wow.
I haven't figured that one out yet.
Okay.
So I don't know. I still kind of, for a while, they had a driver in them, as they were still testing them, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of still want the driver. I do.
I mean, if what we're saying isn't just pointing directly to how much we need user experience professionals, I mean, it's just like obvious town,
It just is like, how are these things supposed to work? What are all those edge cases that we think about that people won't?
Right.
We were leaving a show, my husband and I, the other day, and like there were Waymos trying to like park where they weren't supposed to let people off. You don't see the sign that says, no ride share here or whatever. And all the people directing traffic knew how to game the system, right? Like they knew what sensors to flash so they wouldn't stop, and like where to hit them. But it's all those edge cases, right? That's what we do. Can't get rid of us. Not if you want to have a good experience.
That's right.
I want to tie these two questions together because I have a thought.
Okay.
So you did this, you've written this article.
Yeah.
Even I've been doing this podcast. AI is no doubt consuming all of this information, right?
Yes.
So part of me wonders about like, what is how like there are probably I'm completely guessing this, but there are probably going to be founders or VC people that start to create their own little UX practitioners, their little virtual AI agent practitioners. Let's talk about some pros and cons to that.
Oh, that I'm certain people are doing it now. Absolutely, they are. Especially in all these startups, right? Because they don't value it, they don't understand it, and they're like, well, we want to be really lean, so we'll just have ChatGPT design it for me, or Claude, or Figma make, or whoever, it doesn't matter. But what they're going to see is that they're not going to have anything that's differentiated, right? So it'll look like every other thing, and it will do things the same way. And it will copy the bad crap, right? Because that's what's out there. Which is, I thought of that too, as you were saying it, is, when things are getting crawled, a lot of companies are blocking it, right? So if you're blocking what can get crawled, then the AI isn't going to get better, right? Because it's all needs to be trained. Right? So if it can't get trained on the awesome things like your podcast, obviously, they're not going to get good experiences. And so do I think that these startups or these smaller companies should hire a team of designers? No, that's probably not the best place for you to do it, but you need a couple. You need a couple that can work in that triad, right? And work with the engineers and work with the PMs and be lean and use, again, AI where it makes sense in the production, and where you're writing prompts to generate the ideas and get things to go faster and validate it with customers, sure. But when it comes to, I think about people are so quick to say we don't need design, AI can do it, but engineers will be like, what, you can't get rid of me? It's like, can't we though? Can't we? Because a lot of the stuff you guys do it's binary, right? It's right or wrong. And then they'll get all up in arms about it. I'm like, yeah, same thing for us, right? So maybe you don't need an army of people. Maybe you do have some people in India. Maybe you do have, you're using AI tooling, but you still need the experts there to know if what comes out of that is worth it, right? And going back to India even made me think of it, like when I get outputs from my production teams across the globe, and I'm not, saying bad things about people in India, please do not take that from this. That's not what I'm saying. But people who are doing more production work, which is what I think AI is good for, you still need to validate it. You still need to make sure it's solving the problem. You're still making sure that the experience makes sense when you click screen to screen to screen, or when you have those edge cases. Did you think about that? Did you solve for that? Let's make sure that we do. And that's what they still need us for, right? So I do think it's important, or hire a consultant, get a fractional design leader to come in and help you figure that out, right? Like that's another way we could work and be more malleable, but you still need it. I don't think you can get past it if you want to have your business go anywhere and thrive and stick around for the next couple of years, right?
Right. Yeah, I think what I also wanted to include is, fractional CDO,
Mhm.
guys, like startups and founders. Being in Nashville, I've been in Nashville for about 2.5 years. What I see here is because of the Music City collaboration spirit, the founders and startups that are here, it's one of the fastest growing areas of startups that are, growth of startups that are here is kind of taking on that spirit of collaboration from like the, music industry. And, I know somebody here, talk to them, and anyone you ask, anyone, if they want, to have coffee, they will have coffee with you. It's like a beautiful thing here. And so with that, it's that spirit of growth that's there, but it's kind of this understanding that I have a good idea, I need an engineer. And
Yeah.
so kind of taking that, thought process and saying, well, now that with the technology we have today, why, maybe let's think about, instead, take your idea, get a design leader or a strategic designer that can help you validate, is this an actual problem? Find some people that can use your product and validate that, and then even build a prototype, because we can do that so easily. One thing you mentioned is you don't use Axure anymore, right? And I wanted to ask you, because we have that speed of building prototypes in, let's say, a quicker format, why don't you use Axure anymore? What's the reason why you moved on?
Just because it's so much easier to just have another tool do it for me, right? Does that mean it's perfect the first try? Absolutely freaking not.
Right.
But it is really fast. And to me, like I said it earlier, it's like I'd rather throw away something it took me 20 minutes to make than something it took me 2 weeks to make, right? But what it's doing is having those conversations with engineering faster. Another thing that came up while you were saying that, Eve, is that I was in another group that I'm in that's more cross-functional. I'm usually the only design leader there, so it's fascinating to hear these other takes. But there was a PM leader there that was like, I'm so used to begging for engineering resources, of saying, like, this is a thing we need to do, and when am I going to get engineering on it? Oh, it's going to be like 6 weeks before they can get on it. And they're like, now the tables are so different. Engineering is building anything they want and everything they want, and coming to me and being like, hey, look at all these things we got, right? And the PMs are like, well, the only thing that's solving a problem we have right now is this one, so go with that, you know? So then it's like, okay, so the tables are flipping on themselves, which is interesting. But then it's like, again, like, should engineering be spending all of that time like making all these other things that they don't know that are going to get used? I don't know, right? Like, maybe it'll spark another idea, and it is faster. I don't, but all of this stuff is going to shake out, right? Like, I just think where everyone's trying everything right now, but it's going to, like, we're going to get to whatever the new normal is.
Right on. Yeah, I think this inventor mode, or whatever we're going to call this, you know, this threshold we're walking through currently, we are kind of, you know, it's like the 1,000 light bulbs, right? Like, with each light bulb, it's not that, you know, the designer, when creating the light bulb, was creating the same light bulb again. There was iteration, right? You were getting to perfection with every iteration. And I think that's something to mention. I like calling inventors designers, because I do feel like designers are the new inventors. And so anytime I do talk to someone, I try to change the language a little. So it's like, oh, what do you mean by that? So instead I'm like, you should get an inventor, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean? It's like someone that can strategically design and help you figure out what your actual problem is.
And now we've gone full circle back to the article, because what that made me think of, when you're like, I'm not making that same light bulb again, which is why, like, don't make me jump through those hoops. I can tell you how I've solved it before, but we're not going to solve it that same way. So let's talk about how we can solve what the new problem is, the problem for you, the problem with the people we have in the room now.
Right on.
Solve it a different way, you know?
Well, the other thing that's unique to AI versus designers or designers or UX practitioners or any type of design leads is that we'll say no, and AI will just, yeah, purple gradients look great. Like, let's make everything a purple shiny glass gradients, like, you know, and we'll just add to it and not push back at all. And what you really need is, you need designers that are going to push back. They're going to want to test with human beings. They're going to want to do all of that.
And the other thing, another experience I had personally with AI recently, you know, I was going through and making my deck again, as we do again and again. And I've talked to a lot of people. They're like, oh, you should have, you know, and have AI help you write some of that. And I was like, oh, okay, let me just see how that goes, right? And, you know, I'd be like, hey, this is what I want to say. These are the inputs, you know, say this, don't say this, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, the first slide, it spit out something. And I'm like, oh, that does sound pretty good. Okay. And so I'm like, I'd put it in there, and then I'd go the next slide, and then I'd be like, okay. And by like the third slide, I'm like, no, that's not what I want to say. Or it kept reiterating, or it kept, like, there was one phrase that I liked, and every slide it was like trying to put the same phrase in. And I was like, okay, no, this isn't going to work for me. And so I'm like, forget it. And like, where I get stuck, I might ask for a prompt, but then I have to put it in my own voice. Cause again, like, who do you want to hire, AI or me? Right. But the other thing that really irritated me about it, and I'm sure you guys have obviously dealt with this, where like, don't do this. I want to make sure I say this. And it's like, oh, you're so right. You're so right. That was a really good idea. And I'm like, okay, all right. I don't need you to kiss my ass here, AI. Right.
Yeah.
So weird, right? I'm like, who taught it to do that?
And it's like a new iteration too. I'm like, I don't remember you doing all this at the beginning when we first met.
Yeah.
Constant glazing, as the kids say.
Is that what they say?
Yeah, glazing.
I gotta pocket that one.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. But that's how it feels, right? And it's like, what? No, I don't want to do that. Or like with the article was interesting too, because I wrote it, in my voice and for what I wanted to say. And then someone again was like, put it through AI and it asked me, it's like, where is this going to get published? And I said, on Jacob's Execs in the City Substack. It rewrote it for me. I didn't ask it to. It spit it out, and I'm like, wait, what did you? And I read it, and I was like, oh, you just made me sound like Jacob. No,
Oh,
Whoa.
okay.
it was wild, guys. And I was like, no, thanks. Didn't ask for that. And also I'm like, that's him. That's his voice. Like, go read his articles. I'm like, I want to sound like me, not like him. Thanks, but no thanks. But so you really do have to think about that stuff, right? Like, what if I had handed that to Jacob and had been like, here you go, wrote my article. He'd have been like, what?
Yeah, I think that's what teachers and students are kind of facing today. But actually, to connect back to the authenticity part that you mentioned about us being authentic and still ideating and creating things without like this, throw it into the, this, generic generator. And
Yeah.
then, we're kind of, it's almost like maybe what's happening, we're losing in maybe student teacher case, their voice when you're writing. And in our case of design leader and company is our uniqueness to like, what is this product, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a take on that as well?
I mean, I think that's what we've already kind of talked about a little bit, right? Like, we want to be able to solve the problems for the company. So when you're not thinking about it in terms of your problem space, your differentiation, your unique UI, because it should,
Yes.
right? It should, whether you can feed it your design system in, sure, but you still have to have that, right? You're not going to suddenly start making everything green when your color is blue. Like, that's a silly example, but that's what AI will do, because it's not going to know to look for those things, right? So it's making it more of an extension of the company, right? How do we amplify what we're doing, not replace what we're doing?
Right. I think
These-
the mimic culture, especially in technology,
Okay.
just in code and programming, it's like, oh, just copy and paste, copy and paste. And so I think what you're bringing in is actually an important topic. And Brian, I wonder if we should note this down. This is something that we should talk through, which is the kind of copy and paste culture from IT is kind of getting aren't we getting infiltrated? Where designers, okay, make the design system, just grab it from IBM or Carbon Design or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, wait a minute. There's like a brand here. There's a personality. There's ways that we can communicate through UI and UX that
Yep.
is differentiated.
And I think this, Brian, this is a little bit what you were saying too. Like, we will say no at times, right? Like, how many times over the years, like, this isn't new, right? Well, people will be like, oh, make it look like Uber, make it look like Apple,
Yeah.
make it look like XYZ company, right? But we were always the ones saying, no, like, why do you like it? Oh, it's clean. Oh, you like, lots of white space. Oh, you like fewer clicks, whatever it is, right? Like, you want it to feel simple. Let's get down to what it is you like about those things. We will say no, we will redirect, we will get to what the problem is, but AI won't. So if somebody says, hey, make this look like Uber,
Yeah.
there you go, here's your stuff, and we'll just slap your name on it, right?
Yeah. I think you're touching on something that's really specific too, which is taste. And I've heard that being used by design leaders and artists about AI. I think more in like the animation space, Brian, illustration. I mean, obviously logo design is, just taking it, off the deep end. And so I think this is like in connection with some of that work that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, but it can come down to usability too, right? Like, the very first thing I made in Figma Make, I'm like, all right, let me try this on. Let me see what this looks like, right? And I'm like, I want these 3 sections. So like, when you hit this thing, I want a section for this, a section for this, a section for this. And in my head, I knew how I wanted it to look, and it spit it out in a very different way. which sometimes I was like, yeah, no, that's shit. Sorry, it just is, right? And is that my taste? Sure. But it also comes from all of my years of usability and actual design and flow and all of those things. Was it a way to solve it? Yep. Was it a good way to solve it? I would say no, right?
Yeah.
But would a PM know that, or would an engineer know that?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe in all their years,
CTO, CTO, you're right.
like, you don't know. You
Right.
don't know, right? Maybe they're like, oh, solve the problem, let's go. And then they have people, why aren't people liking this? Why aren't people using this, right? Well, because it was a shit layout, it didn't work, because it wasn't solving the problem, in my opinion, right?
Mhm.
And do I always get it right? No, of course not. You have to iterate, but we have a good, where to start from generally,
I struggle with with two things about AI, and I know I've talked about this before in this show, which is the comic book illustration background of me, and all of my friends in my life are like, man, fuck all of this, and are like, do not want. Well, there's a lot of the UX folks in my life are like wanting to play, wanting to experiment, wanting to learn, and the element that part of me has started to struggle with two big things. One is which that OpenAI and even Claude, a majority of the developers, designers who have like worked on all of it a lot of it, like I think a large percentage of it is white males,
Mhm.
white straight males. So input goes in, input comes out through this lens, right?
Yep.
And then the other side of it, and this UX practitioner Jerry McGovern has been really raising the flag about it, is the energy consumption
Oh my
of
God.
it. That apparently what we need, I think they even said that we need 2 more Californias worth of energy for us to continue to use AI, and I think I saw a report that said that our current energy consumption is at 1.8 Earths right now. So we've burned through Earth, and then we're almost at like 80% of a whole nother Earth. So that's
Terrifying to me. It is
yes.
absolutely terrifying to me, which then, I resisted using AI at all for a long time for that reason. Because I'm like, if I'm going to push that button, I want it to be for a good reason. I
Right.
don't want to do it, and the one like meme I read like a while ago that kind of stuck with me, where it's like, oh, could ChatGPT help me write my shopping list? Sure. But I also would rather have, water in the Colorado River.
Yeah.
I can probably write my own shopping list, right? And it's just wild. And you hear all these stories, not to go on a completely different tangent, of like people like proposing to their, Chat GPT persona or whatever they're,
Yeah.
where it's like, how long and how much have you talked to this computer, right? That you've gotten to that point. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, what are we even doing? Like, no one's really thinking about that at all, in my opinion, not talking about it nearly enough, right? And you see the regulations that are coming out now where it's like, let's not regulate. It's like, like we won't have a planet, but yay, we'll have AI. Like, what's the end game, right?
So
God.
so that's why I wanted to ask you this question, because as a design leader, what would be the advice to the designers, the designers working under you? Like, how would you ask them to balance their approach of being being conscious people and being conscientious of the planet and energy consumption versus learning the new skills? And I know that that is a very small question and not a large boil the ocean question.
Yeah. Well, if I could control everything, that would be one thing, right? But we're also getting edicts that it's like AI for everything. And so I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like, let's define what it's good for. Let's define where to use it correctly and go with that, right? I was just reading some LinkedIn posts from people that I used to work with at other companies being like, I merged my first pull request as a designer because I can use AI to write the code now. And they were really proud of it. And I'm like, okay, like I get it. And maybe you were excited about it. And I get it because you want to feel valuable and you were probably getting some sort of mandate that you had to do that.
Yeah.
Like, just like I'm saying, hey, don't replace designers, I'm not looking to replace engineers either, right? And if I can pull something together quickly to start a conversation where we can understand the interactions, fine. But then go and do your craft. Designers, interaction, engineering, all of that. Like, go back and do your craft the way you know how to do it, right? It's just, it's crazy. I'm not trying to get rid of other fields either, right? I'm not, because we're all trained in those things, but it's hard. So I guess I don't really know how to answer that question, Brian, because I want to say, like, do what you think, let's use it in the way that we think is right and how we define it as designers.
Yeah.
But I know that there's so much pressure in the company that you're working for to be like, AI everything. It's like,
Yeah.
really? And the more you push back against it at times, are you going to push yourself right out of a job? Maybe. But then it's like, again, is that the place you want to be? I don't know. It all comes back to, you have to know why you're making the decisions you make, right? And you have to live with yourself in all the decisions you make, whether you're using AI because of the ethical reasons or because, your company says you need to or whatever, but make sure that you're being authentic to yourself.
I think it's an important point, Christina, because you talked about the interview process, and I'm sure during the interview process, people are going to ask us about, well, how would you use generative AI in this situation? How would you use machine learning? How would you help build us an LLM?
Sure. And you have to have an answer for it. You
That's
do.
right.
But, I'm unapologetic in the way I speak about it, where I'm like, this is how I would use it. This is where you should use it. And this is where you shouldn't. And if
Mm.
it figured it all out, no, but I won't use it for these things. And here's why, right? So you have to have a stance on it, because, do I have to, have a job to provide for my family? Yes. But do I want to do something where I feel proud of what I'm doing every day? Also, yes. And is that some sort of, mythical creature that I might not ever find again? Maybe, but I'm going to try because I want to do something that I'm proud of and lead a team that I'm proud of and deliver a product that I'm proud of. And that does mean my use of AI in it too. Ideally none, but hey, here we are. We have to some degree. So where does it?
Here we are. Yes.
Here we are.
This was so good. Any other questions, Brian, that you had for Christina? We've definitely covered a lot.
Well, Christina, where could everyone who's we just want to repeat, everybody who is listening to this, where can they find your article at?
Yeah.
So it is on the Execs in the City Substack that Jacob Warwick runs. I have posted it on my LinkedIn too, so there's a link to it there, and there's also on Jacob's as well. I am looking to write more and to do more talks like this too. So if anybody is interested, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk. But I do think it's important to have our voices out there, right? And to really say how this industry is changing, what is right, what we should keep, and what we should let go too, right? So we'll see. But I do have it on my Substack too, but it's the only thing I have. So it's nothing very exciting there, but more to come, I hope.
We'll make sure we link to it in the show notes, and we'll make sure we can link to your LinkedIn in the show notes as well.
All right, great. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for asking me. It was great to just chat with you guys about everything. So I really had fun.
We had fun too.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe, and follow, or become our next victim of bad UX.
UX Murder Mystery is a joint production of Eve, User Experience Design Agency, and Crowley UX, where systems meet stories. It's hosted by Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Edited by Kelsey Smith. Intro animation and logo design by Brian J. Crowley. The music is by Nicholas Lee. You can follow us at UX Murder Mystery. You can email us at questions@uxmurdermystery.com. UX Murder Mystery is a copyright 2025, Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Thanks for listening.